CNN recently sat down with 2024 presidential candidate RFK Jr. and asked him why 1 in 5 Americans say that he has their vote.
Why do 1 in 5 Americans say that they're interested in your candidacy?
I think those are the people who've heard me speak. Those are the people who are listening to podcasts, listening to long-form interviews, and they want to change. They don't want to be told by either party that you have to choose between the lesser of two evils. I think they want a candidate who's going to bring people together, who's going to inspire people, who cares about, I'm the only candidate who's talking about what's happening to the middle class in this country, and this idea that if you work hard and you play by the rules, that you ought to be able to make a decent living, you ought to be able to afford a home, you ought to be able to raise a family, take a summer vacation, and put aside something for retirement. And that was the central promise of the American dream. And it's now gone for this generation, particularly people 20 to 35, who I am very, very strong with, are seeing that it no longer applies to them, and they're feeling betrayed.
With us now to discuss is Tony Lyons, publisher of Skyhorse and a co-founder of American Values 2024, the pro-RFK Jr. Super PAC. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, that interview, a couple of which we just watched, did the rounds quite virally due to a number of sort of fact checks that came out. And I wondered what the Kennedy crew thought of that appearance and how that interview was handled.
Yeah, I think that, Bobby Kennedy did a great job, that he made some very important points. And that's that the American public wants to have a choice. And, more than half the people in this country are saying that they want to have a third alternative to Biden and Trump. And they get that with Bobby Kennedy. And the people who hear him speak are overwhelmingly for him. So, about a month ago, for all people in the country, 35 years or younger, if the election was held today, they would elect Bobby Kennedy. And then 2 weeks later, there was a poll that showed that for all people under 45, if the election was held today, 35 or 40 million people would vote for Bobby Kennedy right now. So, and you're seeing him surge with Black people, Hispanic people, independent voters. So all of these different groups. And so the only question now seems to be, can the DNC or the RNC set back voting rights, for 50 years and try to keep Bobby Kennedy off the ballot? And then you wonder, what are they so afraid of? Why do they want to keep Bobby off the ballot rather than get on to the stage with him and convince the public that they have better ideas, that they would do things that would help the American public, that their policies, their letters, that the things that they would do as president would improve the lives of hardworking Americans. And that's what they're afraid of, that Bobby Kennedy will convince them that he's the better choice.
Yes, Democratic operatives, mainstream liberal media commentators are very worried about RFK Jr. providing a spoiler effect and hurting Joe Biden. And then many on the right, many conservative media figures are worried that RFK Jr. will provide that exact same effect on Donald Trump's candidacy or whoever the Republican nominee happens to be. How do you respond to these complaints from both sides that somehow these voters that RFK Jr. has attracted are owed to one of the major party candidates?
Yeah, I mean, the idea that voters owe their loyalty to any political party is absurd. And that should anger Americans, that they should be able to vote for whoever they want to. And if the DNC and the RNC think that democracy is inconvenient, they should make that clear, because that's what they're essentially saying. They're saying that it doesn't matter what you as the voter wants. They've decided that you're only supposed to have two choices. So I can see why they're upset at that, but the American public is not upset, and they're excited at the opportunity to be heard.
You referenced a number of polls, and I think you're completely right that the polls that indicate that there's a lot of appetite for RFK-style independent candidate are causing a lot of concern for establishment members of both parties who are afraid of their vote share getting eaten into by someone like RFK Jr. It's also true, however, that polls show that a majority of Americans, including a majority of Democrats and a majority of independents and 49% of Republicans, support a ceasefire. And RFK Jr. was recently engaged in an exchange on breaking points, in which also went viral and got a lot of backlash for his position on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Do you think that is out of step? Are you concerned that his position on that issue is wildly out of step with the exact sliver of the electorate that might be interested in an alternative to Joe Biden's policies in that region?
So I would say that, Bobby Kennedy is clearly the anti-war candidate, and he very strongly wants to prevent the forever wars that both of the other candidates have been, proponents of. And so he really will, as president, end these wars and shut down bases and bring the soldiers home and rebuild the middle class in this country. So I think that when it comes down to it, as president, those people would prefer Bobby Kennedy to Trump or Biden. The Israel-Palestine question is an incredibly complicated one. And Bobby is the candidate who, as president, would be able to solve it. And the fact that so many people are so, encouraged to believe that Bobby Kennedy could solve it is really fascinating, because it's clear that Trump had the opportunity, that Biden has the opportunity now to come up with really great policies and answers, but he hasn't done it. And so many people are eager for Bobby Kennedy to come out with a statement. And he's doing exactly what a candidate ought to do, that he's studying the history, he's looking at all of the options. And that's what we want. We want a president who's going to come out with common sense answers, who's going to talk to all parties and come up with a way to solve one of the most intransigent issues and problems in the history of mankind. And I believe Bobby Kennedy will do that. And I think voters, when they hear from him more, when they see him on stage debating these issues with Trump and Biden, they will prefer him. They will see that he's the candidate who will solve these kinds of problems.
Just a quick follow-up. We're seeing now an escalation, in fact, under Biden's policy in the region. Of course, there's 20,000 people who have been now killed in Gaza. But with the choice of the Houthis to block off the Red Sea to the shipping ships, cargoes, there's been some significant escalations there, where the United States is now putting together a group of a number of countries that are meant to intercede on the behalf of maintaining those shipping corridors, which many people are saying is an escalation that could lead to conflict, for example, with Iran and other states in the region. So I'm curious, you say that he's an anti-war candidate, but many voters are looking and having trouble discerning any daylight between Joe Biden's position and RFK Jr.'s position when it comes to Israel. So how would you distinguish one from the other?
I would look at what Biden has done so far. So he has clearly not been an anti-war candidate. So when you talk about the Israel-Palestine question, it's incredibly complicated. Bobby Kennedy has much less information at his disposal than Joe Biden does, but he is working hard to talk to as many people as he can and to do the exact things that he would do as president, which is to look at this incredibly complicated question and come up with practical, common sense ways to solve them. So I think that's what you see that's different, that Joe Biden has all of the access to the information and he's not doing anything with it.
Tony Lyons, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.